Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Tuesday afternoon. This is a big day. I got some great news from everybody that supported this show. My friends out there have gotten me over the 500 subscriber limit. We're approaching the 600 subscriber limit on YouTube. So if you haven't yet, I've got a favor to ask. I would love if you can subscribe to the All Access Live YouTube channel by going to www.youtube.com/All Access Live with Kevin Rankin. Once I get to the 1,000 subscriber mark, I have some giveaways. And one of those giveaways is going to be that I'm going to select a random subscriber to come and host an event with me. I've talked to the band, and I think a flock of seagulls would love to have you co-host an interview with me. So I'm going to bring you on camera, and you can ask your questions, and we'll have a hangout where you can just come backstage and hang out live with a flock of seagulls. There's some other things I'll give away too, but that's a good one, I think. It'll be fun. Now, I also want to thank my sponsors at 5 Star Guitars for being here. Boom! From the beginning. They've helped us out, and they're based in Beaverton, Oregon. They've got great guitars, they've got repairs, and they've got lessons. A ton of used equipment, so you can save a bunch of money, and you'll save even more because there's no sales tax. So if you go to www.5starguitars.com and grab some guitars and get some lessons, you can get lessons from pros like Jennifer Batten, my buddy. So tell Jennifer I sent you, tell 5 Star Guitars that I sent you, and they would appreciate it, and I'll appreciate it as well. Now, let me tell you about my next guest. We got stuck last week. I was evacuated to the coast, and he was evacuated as well. We had fires going on in the neighborhood, and all sorts of Wi-Fi and crazy internet stuff happened, and so we got cut off. But the cool thing is, he's back with us today. Look who I've got. I've got Dave Scott.
Good to see you back in the studio. The black brick looks awesome.
Thank you, man.
Very cool.
I tell some people that I'm homeless and I'm right out in the alleyway, and I just, I've got some sunlight here.
You should get like a can of spray paint and like spray paint, slippery when wet or slippery when Kevin, something in the background there.
I think what I need to do is get everybody's name that I could spray paint each time I interview them, right? It's a caption. So I'll get Dave Scott, and like Eva Longoria and Taylor Swift, whoever I can get on the show.
Yeah, that dude like the wall by the bathroom at CBGB's.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of those kind of deals.
Yeah. For those outside the Portland area that don't know about Satyricon, then CBGB's or the whiskey in LA. But yeah, no, rest in peace, Satyricon.
Yeah.
Man, hey, so you're back. You're safe.
Yep.
You got. I loved on Embrace the Change on your podcast the other day. You had a great story about the whole level 2 to level 3 jump and how you had to do the evacuation. And I loved the scary talking about as soon as the sheriff's department came and got you out, they spray painted the evacuation note.
So creepy. It was right out of a zombie movie. Like the minute he knew, because I come running out and I'm throwing stuff in the trunk, and the Lake Oswego police, because the Malala police are busy. They're so overextended. So it was a Lake Oswego cop. He goes, "You got to get out of here. They're evacuating." I know. I shut the trunk. I'm heading out. And the minute he sees me get in my car, he gets out, pulls out a blue can of spray paint. Shh, shh. In other words, this house is clean.
Bring out the dead.
And no more surreal feeling in the world than to just drive away from your house going, Godspeed.
Yeah, man.
Here we go.
And you did it, though. Everything is safe. And
thank goodness.
You cleaned up all the ash already?
Thank goodness. Yeah, we still got a lot of action. There's a bit of smoky smell, but boy, props to the fire department. Props to all the fire squads that were here. Did you read about the Hillbilly Brigade?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Pretty great stuff. So there's a bunch for those who aren't familiar with the area. This is an old logging town, and the Hillbilly Brigade are a bunch of people that live here. They live out in the woods. And they realized, there's nobody that's going to stop these fires, because this was at the point where these two pretty big fires were going to converge and this come rolling into Malala. It looked pretty dire.
Huge.
So these guys, they're from a logging town. They grew up in logging families. They had the equipment. They had the know-how. There's like 1,300 of them that finally organized, and they played a huge part, along with the fire department and all the fire workers, in stopping and deterring that fire. It's amazing. Heroes. I'd love to erect a statue in their honor.
You know what, man? I have a feeling, because, of course, we had great rains and everything that came in. Fires aren't completely out yet, unfortunately, but in that area, at least, the risk of death and huge loss is gone, which is amazing.
And I'm just so grateful. I mean, to be sitting here in my studio right now, knowing that I'd given up everything in this room, all my cherished possessions and milestones from my career, because you can't throw everything in your car. So we had the bare essentials
Yeah.
to be able to still have that and sit here and look at them and broadcast on my equipment. It's just, it's a reminder that you got to enjoy what you have when you have it, because it
Yeah.
could be gone.
It really gives you perspective, right? I mean, when you came back, I'm betting you're like me, that I looked at everything that I did grab and looked at the stuff that I left behind. And now I'm going through this purging phase where I'm thinking, you know what? If I didn't need it, I don't need it here, honestly, because I have clutter. I mean, over the years, right? You just get stuff. And so I've been going through room by room, and it's cathartic to be able to purge this stuff. I wanted to do that at the beginning of the pandemic. I wanted to get rid of stuff I didn't need. And there's great documentaries out there, that talk about just cleaning house, basically, and minimalism, being able to, just sort of reduce the amount of clutter chaos in your life. And
I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy.
Yeah.
It's like a big giant reboot.
Yeah. We all needed a reboot, I guess.
I mean, because we have every assignment my daughter ever did in grade school out in the garage.
Don't get rid of that. That's important.
I would think, though, that you would want to maybe at least whittle it down to have maybe a representative, a small packet, maybe a small, rather than 6 boxes.
Okay. Well, I didn't get rid of that stuff. I went through it all last night, and I found notes back and forth from teachers talking about discipline reports, and also grades, and a note from my son to me, where he was negotiating more wages for chores that he did. We didn't do, allowances. What I would do, I'd give them, tasks and that kind of thing, and they just had their weekly chores. But the kid owed some money that I paid off because he didn't pay something off, and he wrote me this letter, and I just found it last night. And it's funny, as a parent, he said, "Here's how I see it. I spent." He said, "It cost you less than 3 hours of your work time to pay off my wage or pay off my bill, and I worked all day on those chores. So I consider that we're even after taxes." And I said, "That's an interesting way to think about it. Here's what I suggest. Before you negotiate anything with me, negotiate your wage first and with me, and then get a college degree, earn a living wage that you think is commensurate to what the work is that you're doing, and then we'll sit down. We'll have a educated conversation about it."
Yeah.
And I showed it to him last night. This is the thing was like 8 years old, and he's like, "Yeah, I guess you had some good suggestions."
Yeah, I guess you were. Secretly, though, even though you couldn't admit it, weren't you kind of impressed?
Yeah. Well, I was proud of the parenting part that I did, but I was even really proud of him for recognizing it now and being able to acknowledge, that this is cool, Dave. You know what? There were some friends of mine from Australia that were on for our first part. They've just chimed in. So Karina and Catherine, I'm so glad to see both of you guys here. You've got a lot of fans out there, Dave Scott.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
This is great. I love your setup. By the way, congrats on the pub. I saw Channel 6. They had a report on you. I don't know if you saw that or not.
Man, I was so fortunate. Really.
That was awesome.
It was cool. Props to Nicole DaCosta and AM Northwest at Coin. I'm really, really glad that, it's one thing to feel proud of, some promotion, but I'm so grateful, Dave. When I go back through and I look at the interviews and the conversations I've had, we're at like 118 or something now. It's ridiculous. And when I looked at them all, I thought, how blessed am I to have had these conversations that are life-changing to me? Really to get to know somebody deeper than just a, hey, hello, the superficial stuff that happens when you're only 5 minutes in a club or backstage. But man, I'm so grateful. It's a cool event to point it out. And I'm really glad that you've had, man, I bet you can't even count the number of interviews you've had on radio, right?
Oh my God. No.
Do you get to stay in touch with those
like
people?
3 hard drives full of interviews. That was one of the things I saved when I was making my go bag when the fire was approaching. Yeah. Throughout my career, and especially at my time at Kink, we had the Kink Live Performance Lounge, and we had so many opportunities to interview the coolest people, Lyle Lovett, and I got to talk to Paul McCartney.
No.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. One of the coolest things I ever had happen. This was a phone interview.
Okay.
When Paul played the Rose Garden. And so I was doing the afternoon show at the time. And so Paul was on his way to the Rose Garden in the back of the limo, and we made the hookup. And so I got Paul on the phone. He's in the back of the limo. He's being Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And I so respect this guy because he's answered these as hard as I tried to come up with beautiful questions that he's never been asked. He's heard them all a
Of
thousand
course.
times. But he made me feel like I was an interviewing God by the way he answered them with, complete interest and engagement. And then I took a risk, and I thought, I'm never going to get another chance like this. I said, hey, Paul, you're in the back of the limo there, and it's rush hour. Any chance you want to roll down the window and give us a traffic report? And man, the
But he
guy,
didn't.
this is Paul McCartney. The guy just jumped into it. He was totally into the bit, rolled down the window, and he knew the terms. He goes, oh, well, this is a bad Paul McCartney, but I'm looking out at what is it called? The Bond Field. I've got the Bond Field. It's moving along rather nicely, and it
Oh,
looks like a rather chipper drive home this afternoon.
oh, man, I'm glad you got that on tape. That is so cool.
I do. A lot of those moments. We had, there was a, I wish they were comprised of Nickel Creek. Are you familiar with
Of course, yeah, the country band.
Yeah, Nickel
Yeah.
Creek, and they had a bluegrass side project that they were touring around with a number of years ago, and their bass player was John Paul Jones
Are you
from
kidding
Led
me?
Zeppelin.
Oh my
And so we had them in the live performance lounge, and they were fantastic, and the interview was winding down. And once again, I just, this little devil popped up on my shoulder and went, okay, dummy, you're never going to get this chance again. And before we let him go, hey, John Paul, you can tell me to go take a hike, but I just have to ask, is there any way on God's green earth that you could just give us a little taste of Dazed and Confused?
Oh, no way.
And he goes, oh, yeah, no problem. And just brr, brr, brr. And I'm sitting there 5 feet away from John Paul Jones playing Dazed Confused, got shivers up and down my spine going, I'm so glad that worked. That could have totally blown up.
What a gift, man.
Oh, yeah.
Both of those guys have this reputation for being very approachable and so humble. I mean, Sir Paul McCartney, right? The dude who is, really, the greatest living legend, I think, at this point, right? I think he very easily could be pretentious and egotistical and condescending. And I see little clips of him backstage, like teaching up and coming guitarists. Oh, you know what? Actually, move the hand up this way on the fretboard, and being willing to hear from them how they're playing their parts. It's a gift. I think the day before you and I talked last week, did you see that I had Paul's stepmom and stepsister on the show?
No, I did not. How'd you score that?
Yeah. Okay. So Angie and Ruth McCartney now live in Los Angeles. They run McCartney.com, which is McCartney Multimedia. They do all of the merchandising for the estate and the family. And a great friend of mine, Greg Ross, owns this huge merchandise company out of Syracuse, New York. He works with McCartney's to do their merchandise and sort of distribution on the East Coast. He does all of the merchandising for the 80s shows that we do. So he's been a great friend for a long time. We do all sorts of things together, like the Back to the Basement, Abducted by the 80s shows. He just did this big benefit with guitarists, the greatest guitarists on the planet, for Crew Nation, to donate money to all the crew guys that are out of work, lighting guys, roadies, sound guys. So last week they did, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Jennifer Batten, all the greatest guitarists. He did that stuff. He loved just my pivot because we've been touring together for years. I'd see him as the merch guy, and he said, let's do something together. And I just volunteered to do the charity stuff. And he said, Ruth and Angie are Spitfires. Paul's stepsister and stepmom. I think his stepmom is like 89. She seems like she's maybe 50. She is just a ball of fire. And together, they had crazy stories. She married Paul's dad in 1964, I believe.
So Paul was still home.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, Paul had a home that he bought his dad, and he wasn't at home. Okay. He was up the street, but he'd come over all the time, and she said he was just amazing to welcome me into the family. And man, there were cool stories. This is, I don't mean to give you my stories. You got the cool stories, but it's
cool that's what happens. This was my one worry about this, because I am so used to being the one asking the question. I have to say, it's a different experience being the one to answer the questions. It's it's a whole different trip, and maybe even a little harder because I'm not running the show right now.
Yeah.
You don't know what's coming up next.
Well, you can run the show, but the thing is, when you and I first met, I can remember sitting down in one of the Oregon Music Hall of Fame gatherings, right, where we got together, we were planning out things for the year, and I knew your voice, of course, man, and I didn't realize, that you were a very accomplished drummer. If I'd known that ahead of time, you and I would have had completely different conversations.
No kidding.
But you know what, man, you are so involved in the community. You always have been. I love the fact that you volunteered to be on that board. And, your voice is iconic. It's cool for people to get to see you now. For folks that missed the first part of this last week, poor Dave burst a blood vessel in his eye. And so it's kind of in the shadows here. But every once in a while, if he looks up, we can kind of see a little bit.
I could put the Johnny Depp patch on, but I don't know if it's bad enough to warrant that.
I loved that, though, because, you looked so badass, right? So you know what, you do lean. I get to see drums and cymbals behind you, which is cool, too. So yeah, look at this. Oh my gosh. Yeah. If you had a leather jacket on right now, man, this is your audition. I love that.
Is this my new?
You look like a pro. Had you done this before? Have you worn this?
No. I was just last week when we were going to do our thing. It was really bad, and I thought it was maybe distracting. So I went to the drugstore and I said, I need an eye patch, but it has to be black.
Yeah,
they gave it to me, and I put it on, and I thought, well, that doesn't look too bad.
No, it looks.
And then Iris Harrison watched our little segment last week, and she said, "Hey, keep the patch."
That's right, man. She, you know what? If Iris says so, you have to do it.
We should do a little vote: patch on or patch off.
Okay, folks, you there in the chat. We've got a lot of people were chiming in about the Paul report, which is awesome. Mike saw that. Jen Adolph, my friend in Florida, she said, "If you don't ask, you'll never know." That's her life motto.
That's always been my motto too. I've always been willing to take a risk because, like with Paul or with John Paul, what are the odds I'm ever going to be in the same room with John Paul Jones? And how much would I kick myself if I didn't do that? So
big time, man.
Yeah, man.
Better to ask forgiveness than ask permission.
That's a classic radio rule too.
That's man.
Rule.
We didn't get into that too much. I mean, we talked a little bit about your history last time, but some of the risks on radio are tough, right? They really are, because Karina says she's in Australia. She says, patch on. I think if she's willing to stay up this late in Australia to watch the show, man, then I think between Iris Harrison and Karina, keep the patch on, buddy.
It's done.
Love
it's
it.
Done.
This may be something that even when the blood vessel heals, you'll never take it off again.
Even though the entire left side of the room just disappeared, but that's okay.
Yeah, man. Well, you know what? At this point, it's just what the people get to see, right?
That's right.
And if the ladies are voting for it, then this has to happen. So
there's no more discussion needed.
Diana Wolzik, actually, she says, if she's not mistaken, Ruth McCartney also works with the Nelsons. So Matthew and Gunnar, that's right. They actually run his whole merchandising and PR. So the Nelsons, those two brothers that you probably played a bunch of on the radio in the past.
Oh yeah.
They look exactly the same now to this day.
Astounding. Well, we went on a cruise actually it was a number of years ago. We went to the Caribbean and they were on the cruise. They played the cruise. And they still got the hair, still got the long blonde hair. They still look identical. And they're harmony. It's blood harmony.
Yeah.
You can't beat it. It's so awesome.
It's, two things about this. Number one, there's a local set of twins here, Christy and Darcy Bradley. Do you know them at all, the Bradley sisters?
Rings a bell, don't know them.
They have a band called the Dance Hall Days. And it's that same thing. I actually want to have them on the show. We've talked over the last few months about it. It's uncanny when they get together and they sing. And there is something about that, man, about family bond. Their voice is their voices together, no matter what they're singing. They could sing silly, dumb nursery rhymes and still just make you cry because it's so beautiful,
Like Joseph.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. Yep.
Same deal. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I wish I had that. I would love to have it. Rita Simon, she says it too. Patched, mask, and cap. Hi, everyone. And good night.
Okay.
This is great, man. So I was going to ask you about some of the risks that you got to take. We didn't set this up, as people may or may not know. I don't like to pre-think any of these conversations, but thinking about you and radio, man, I would bet if you have any stories about risks that you took that were, that you can look back on now, that, man, I got away with that. That was cool.
Yeah, actually, I can. A couple are maybe. Why don't we start with a couple that come to mind immediately? Life risks.
Okay.
When I think about some of the things that I did growing up in radio, like picking up and moving down to Southeast Texas
Yeah.
without a contract and without health insurance, just for the adventure of it. I mean, I would never do that now. You know,
Sure.
you'd stop and you'd think about and especially nowadays with
Oh,
the temperament of radio and how volatile it is. I've never considered, but I did it in a moment. Didn't even think about it. Did it in a moment's notice. Um, Moving to Seattle was a huge risk too,
okay.
because see, this would have been 1978, and I was down in Southeast Texas at a radio station, Zoom 104.5, really cool rock station. Really, my first experience doing a really organized, cool rock format. It was KZOM. We called it Zoom 104.5, and it was Texas rock. And because it was Southeast Texas, it was really a unique format that really only would work in that area. So we were playing David Allan Coe
Oh, wow.
and Willie and Waylon with Ted Nugent,
Hmm.
believe it or not. And it all worked because it was from that area. So that was down in the area. I mean, driving to work every day, I would pass the house that Janis Joplin grew up in. And Johnny Winter was an old legendary local star. He was from Beaumont, Texas. So, we were down in that area, and it was a super fun cultural experience for 3 years. But then after going on 3 years, I'm sure you know this feeling. You start to get the little feeling in the back of your head that it's time to move on, move
Yeah.
up. You should look for something new. And I had entered this contest. It was put on by a syndication company, a jingle syndication company, Drake Chenault. They were looking for the top 5 DJs in the country. Part of the deal is if you won, they would, this is going to date it, they would press your air check. An air check is like an example of your work, which at the time you put on reel-to-reel tape.
Hold on a sec. Before you continue it, give me one. Give me one of yours. I love it.
What?
One of your air checks. This is awesome. Listen. Okay, everybody.
Oh, no. An air check is like a produced thing. It's like a sampler of what you can do.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I was thinking you were doing it like a station ID. Sorry.
No.
Right. Okay, sorry.
It's like segments from your show that you would send out to people to go, here's what I sound like.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so I sent an air check into this contest, national contest, not thinking anything of it. 2 or 3, 4 months go by, and all of a sudden I get this thing in the mailbox from Drake Chenault. And I think, well, here's my rejection letter. And it opened up, says, congratulations, you are a winner in the top 5 talent search. I'm like, what? And so what I did was I took that and put it in my package to apply for the job in Seattle that had opened up at Kazam in 1981. Kazam was kind of a spin-off station from what Kink was back in the 80s. It was that same kind of format. And I got the gig. I think a lot of the reason was because I was one of the winners of this top 5 talent search. And a lot of this is maybe lack of experience. It was a risk, but I took it because I wasn't familiar with the risks. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
To me, it was just this huge adventure. And here's my big break. Let's pack our bags. Let's pack the 2 cars and let's caravan from Southeast Texas up to Seattle, and let's go be on the radio in Seattle. And so,
what year was that?
It was, when was it?
Yeah, what year?
1981.
81. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Actually, my first day on the air at Kazam was actually my first break at Kazam. I went to open my mic and introduce myself, and the newsman was going crazy, and I looked up and flipped the switch and put him on, and Reagan had just been shot.
Wow.
Ronald Reagan, remember that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
The guy that was trying to impress Jodie Foster, I think, was the story.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so that was my introduction to Seattle radio. Was Ronald Reagan getting shot?
Oh my gosh, man!
But Seattle was my first exposure to really serious major market radio, and that's a whole different animal. But
yeah, was
super
it scary?
fun. It was scary, but also I was learning so much. I was like a sponge. I was just soaking in everything. And I was there for 6 years. And unfortunately, I got to Kazam, excuse me, right about the time they were going through some format shuffles, and they jettisoned the album format and went to this adult contemporary format, which they called classy. And so they were playing Barry Manilow. We were playing Barry Manilow and Eddie Rabbitt. And I didn't mind it, though, because it was kind of like a top 40 format where you could talk up the ramps.
Okay.
You know what I mean by talk up the ramps?
Well, explain to me. I'm picturing talk up the ramps like just sort of building up the post, hitting the post.
Yeah, you got it. You nailed it. So
yeah.
Every other format that ever worked was albums, and so you would never even touch the music. You know,
Yeah.
you'd only talk where there wasn't music. Well, now finally I could start the song and do all my talking up the post to hit the post, talk up the ramp. And that was thrilling. That was a lot of fun. You know, it was a big top 40 kind of a sound. They had reverb on the microphones, and the corporate guys called it Elvis, put a little Elvis on the microphones. And it was a blast. I really enjoyed myself. Had some really good ratings. My first rating book in 1981 at Classy was #1.
Wow.
Had the newspaper out there because it was a brand new format, and they were talking to me about, hey, you know, for new formats, and you're right out of the box, #1. How's it feel? So it was a wonderful experience. But I was there at 6 years, and then I discovered what a evil mistress radio can be.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Here's where the story gets interesting, because you and I, we had talked before, and up until this point, you know, we realized we had both been in Great Falls. I got my start in Great Falls, and you said you weren't that impressed with it, but for me, it was a magical place because it was the first time I was on my own, and it was the first time I did radio. I mean, everything was just exciting. I was being introduced to so many things like broadcasting live, and then I went from there to a little tiny town in Iowa, and it was my first gig programming, and then from there was hired to go down to Southeast Texas. So it was, you know, up the ladder, 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 till I got to Seattle, and then naively I thought, well, this is just the trajectory I'll continue taking.
Right, next Howard Stern in New York City. Here we come.
Here we come. It's exactly the same thing. So 6 years into it, and the ratings are good. Everything's feeling fine. KLSY. We had just bought our first house. Our daughter had been born 2 or 3 years before that. It was the first Monday after New Year's Eve. I had just gotten done hosting the very first New Year's Eve ball drop at the Space Needle. That was a brand new idea, and I was hosting the party in the Space Needle. And again, this will date it. We were, you know, I was leading like a conga line throughout the Space Needle doing Walk Like an Egyptian, like the Bangles. And
nice.
It was a huge success, huge. And it's still kind of afterglow, even Monday, when program director called me into the office. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get congratulated for such an awesome job, right?
Yeah. You walk in with your high five already, and then...
I'm ready. Strokes for Dave. This is going to be awesome. And it was like a car accident coming out of her mouth. We're going to have to let you go. First time in my life I'd ever been fired. Didn't really know why. It didn't make sense. But that set me on an entirely different course, because that introduced me to what you have to do to keep going when everything's been pulled out from under you.
Okay.
You know, that's where you discover what you're made of. What do you draw from when all the strokes are gone, all the accolades are gone, and when, you know, there's a trajectory that happens when you get fired. Anybody who has, I'm sure, knows this. You're in the honeymoon phase the first couple of weeks.
Sure.
Everyone's calling. Oh, you got screwed.
Right.
Oh, this is so unfair. Hey, you'll land on your feet, man. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, give me a call. Yeah, we'll talk. And 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by, and all of a sudden, the phone calls start to drop off, and you start to feel like you're in the ocean, floating out to the middle of the sea.
Right. No boats in sight.
No, you really begin to learn, okay, if I want to keep doing this, I've got to be creative. How do I maintain the Dave Scott brand? How do I make the connections I need to score another gig? In this case, it was somebody I met that was just starting a station up in Spokane. Okay. And I went down and interviewed with them. I had just, interestingly enough, shortly before I got let go at KLSY, I had already begun to get that little tingle in the back of my head that said, you want to do something new here, because I was doing middays. So you want to do morning radio. So I had really been in the production room working hard on this morning show demo that I was planning on, at the time, sending out to the station the company owned in Kansas City. So I had this demo already. It was divine ordinance. It was perfect. So I used that to get the interview in Spokane. And they hired me, and it was for radio station called KKZX, which is still there.
Okay.
And I was there for about a year and a half until I met a guy by the name of Tom Turner.
Oh.
Tom was the all-night guy. And when I first got there, I was teamed up with Lisa Moon. And she was the news person. I was the jock. And so it was Scott Moon, S&M. And we were doing our thing, and it was good radio. But Tom would always, because since he was the all-night jock, he would come in, and before I would go on the air, he would sit and talk to me in the mornings. And he was a comedy machine. I'm sure you know people like that. They're just so naturally hilarious. And it never stopped. It was always coming out of him. So I'd constantly be going, can I have that line? Sure, I don't need it. Go ahead. And Lisa and I worked together for about a year, and then she moved on. She left the station. And at that point, they decided to team Tom and I up at KKZX, and it was magical. It was the first time that I ever experienced the team dynamic when there's really, really natural chemistry. And it was a joy to come in and work with this guy every day. We just had a blast. And we were going for about a year and a half. And one day, I don't remember how it happened, but somebody had been up at the front desk. And, you know, the front desk, the front person that answers the phone, the little pink slips that they put in people's little slots when they have messages. They had seen a message from the morning guy at the top 40 station. And they came in to Tom and they said, hey, you guys better watch your back. They're talking to this guy about coming in to do the morning show. Mm. And we went, what? Because we were having a ball. It was great. Things were moving up. It felt
Ratings were good. Yeah.
Yeah. We couldn't figure this out. But they were sure enough talking to this guy about coming in to do the morning show. And so we got pissed.
Yeah.
And we said, you know what? Let's just work our asses off. You know, if they're going to do this, they're going to do this, but we're going to make it a hard decision. So we just put our noses to the grindstone. And I mean, we were putting in 16-hour days writing comedy and coming up with bits.
Material. That's the thing.
Material.
Yeah. Okay.
Constantly. Just ideas. We were this little radio station in Spokane, and I was on the phone talking to Hollywood agents.
Okay.
To get Hollywood stars on the phone with us. You know, hey, it's Ed McMahon's birthday. Any chance we can talk to Ed on the show and wish him a happy birthday? So yeah, this little station in Spokane, just from this grassroots work, we got Ed McMahon and Ann and Nancy Wilson, and you know all these stars from Three's Company. You know the B stars, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
they weren't B stars at that point, though. Suzanne Summers, come on.
Suzanne Summers, yeah. I mean, they were still pretty big names.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were really cooking.
You bet.
And then one day we're having this great show, and I go out to the front desk to get one of those little pink slips, and it's a disc jockey's dream. It's from the program director of KGON.
Wow. Who
had been in town, and he was listening. We didn't know. And I still have the memo. It says, "Have dollars for you."
You got it still, that little slip?
Oh yeah. Are you kidding me?
Cool, man.
Oh, for sure.
Wow.
So we met him. We went to a hotel and we sat and talked, and one thing led to another. We flew in and met the general manager, and that's how we got signed to come to Portland back in 1990. So Tom and I came to Portland to do the morning show at KGON in 1990, and that's the first time I met Iris and Bob Anchetta, you know, like dear friends of mine, and you know, Marty Party and you know, Terry Hall and Terry Adams and all the people that I'm still just such good friends with. And so that was 1990, and things were going great. You know, you mentioned, you know, getting out and doing you know, civic things, being connected to the city. And we just had some wonderful experiences. There was a week that Tom and I lived up on the roof of the Clackamas Fred Meyer to raise money for the Oregon Food Bank. We got 92 tons of food or something like that. And we pulled it off, and we had Warrant up there. They played on the roof of Clackamas Fred Meyer, and we had Curtis Salgado coming up there. And there was one morning, because we're camping out there, so we've got a porta potty and we've got a tent up there. And this is September, so it was, for the most
Raining.
part, it was beautiful weather, but there was
Oh.
one night that was really rainy and really windy.
Okay.
And bear in mind, we're up on the roof
Yeah.
in a tent, and the wind is blowing our tent over, and so we're, in the broadcast booth trying to cover up the equipment because the wind is blowing the rain in sideways. We don't want to ruin the equipment, and we're on the two-way to the all-night guy going, "We really need help. We have a big problem up here on the roof." And he's like, "Ha ha ha! You guys are so no. We're serious. Blow off this roof. You've got to get somebody." Ha ha ha! Oh, I love you guys. You crack me up.
Oh no. Man, the amount of risk that you had to take there—that's nuts. But I just realized.
I think you don't view it as risk.
Well, at that point in those days too, there was so much more of that going on. There was, community engagement stuff that you talk about. I know that not only charity, but there were ways to get people involved in just being part of the station. I know that, Iris was certainly doing that stuff back in the day, but I do remember, the Mark and Brian era, like the mid 90s really were a big part of that too.
Yeah.
I'm sure you worked with them. I would have bet
Oh, I have a real interesting history with Mark and Brian.
Okay.
You want to hear it?
Of course I do.
It's not a pleasant story.
Oh, they're not all pleasant, but let's hear it.
It's interesting though,
Okay.
because this was KGON, and we were having fun and doing good, and so this would have been 1993, and we just finished our show, and the program director called us in and said, "Hey, we're gonna make some changes." Roy P. Disney had just bought the radio station. And his favorite morning show in Los Angeles was Mark and Brian.
Oh, no.
Uh-huh. And he wanted, on his first new radio station, he wanted his favorite morning show, Mark and Brian. And they were just beginning their syndication drive. And so we lost our gigs. We are the first Mark and Brian victims.
I had no idea. That was 93.
That was 93.
Because I moved to Portland in 94. And so, they were morning guys then. I didn't realize that you were the ones that were usurped from that. What a bummer.
Yep. That's what happened. And that sent us off on a really interesting time. And another one of those times of growth for me, looking back in my career, that was probably the biggest period where I did nothing but just learn and grow and find the strength to go on, because it was super bad timing.
Yeah.
Tom and I were just dedicated to the idea of staying together as a team, because we really thought that we had the goods. We really thought that we could be a Mark and Brian. We could syndicate.
Yeah.
By that time, we had our producer, Travis Box, and he was an actor and a singer. And I mean, it was firing on all cylinders. And so it was really rough when that ended so suddenly, just as Mark and Brian were kicking off their syndication drive. And so 93, 14 months we were unemployed, looking for gigs, because every time we'd get a connection and get something going, it would look really good, and then all of a sudden we wouldn't be getting the calls anymore because Mark and Brian.
Oh no!
Yeah,
everywhere.
It was 14 months of that, and so we went through that period.
That sounds like a bad movie.
It was a nightmare. It was like it would never end. I was telemarketing. I did a paper route. My wife was working. We did a little talk show at KEX. That was fun, but we managed to get by. And then in 1994, Cats in Yakima called.
Okay.
And although we didn't really want to move down that far into a market that small, we thought that this was probably the only way we were going to be able to continue working together.
Yeah, it beats a paper route, right?
Well, yeah. Tom can't help me out with the paper route. We're not entertaining that many people out in front of the mailbox in the morning.
Right.
So we took the gig in Yakima. We went to Cats. And you want to know something crazy?
Yeah.
It was the best thing for me personally as a broadcaster that ever happened.
Well, how so?
Because, well, when I went to Yakima, I just kind of thought, oh, you know what? It's only Yakima. I don't care. And so I just throw open the mic and just start talking.
Yeah. No pressure.
I spent the first 10 years or so of my career being too much into my own head. I don't know if I'm sure you can relate to that.
Totally. Absolutely.
If you're too much into your own head, you get into your own way, and what you're doing quits being organic.
Right.
And essentially, going to Yakima for me is where I learned how to be Dave on the radio.
The authentic self of Dave Scott.
It was
Yeah.
such a great time, a huge time of learning. And Tom and I had a ball. We had, so many great bits. We set the Buttmaster world record. We actually got Suzanne Summers involved. We filled the Sun Dome there in Yakima with, I don't know, about 350 people doing Buttmasters all at the same time.
Oh my God.
And it was weird because these bits in Portland were always so hard to set up, but it seemed like in Yakima, all the dominoes would fall into place for these just awesome, bigger than life bits.
Wow.
Like the minor league hockey team apparently didn't win the trophy, and another team had the trophy, and there was a scuttlebutt that this team shouldn't have had the trophy. And so Tom and I went and organized an armored car, and we drove to this other team's headquarters and took the trophy.
You stole it.
Brought it back to Yakima.
This is perfect for the pirate patch, man. You have the
It's all there. Even back then, I was channeling Jack Sparrow.
That's so good.
So we just had a blast. But at the same time, we knew that we wanted to be in a bigger market. And it was frustrating because, you'd go to radio conventions and people'd see Yakima on your badge, and you're talking to your buddies working in Boston, and it's like, what's going on? Why are you in Yakima? And so we were in Yakima for about 2.5 years, and then a classic rock station. Do you remember Earth 105?
Yeah, of course.
Portland.
Yeah.
Tom and I, one day after our show in Yakima, hopped in the car and drove to Portland and interviewed with the program director of Earth 105. And one thing led to another, and about 3 or 4 months later, they hired us to do the mornings at Earth 105. So we had our glorious return to Portland, and we got to reunite with our producer, Travis Box. Word out to you, Travis. Miss you. And it was so good. Things were firing on all cylinders. We were starting to see response. We were starting to see positive growth. We were beginning to think, okay, this is going to have a happy ending. We're gonna be able to stay in Portland and have a nice career and a nice life, because that's what we wanted.
Yeah.
And
Portland was home to you?
What?
It felt like Portland was home to you.
Oh, it still does.
Yeah. Okay.
It still does. A year and some change into our time at Earth 105, though, the station was sold to Entercom, the company that owns KGON.
Right.
So they don't need 2 classic rock stations. Guess what?
Right.
Out of work. Out of work again. Fired.
And at this point, you're familiar at least with the way that the industry is. So was it a huge surprise to you, or was it as devastating as it had been in the past, or?
It was a surprise in that my wife knew before I did.
Really?
Because it was a Friday, and I had left the radio station. I used to love to go see movies at 11 in the morning because nobody's in the theater.
Yeah.
I'm done for the day. So I just seen a movie, and I'm getting home about 2 o'clock, and I walk in the door, and I've got wine. Hey, it's Friday. We're going to have a good time, Mayor. And I'll never forget, she's up at the top of the stairs, and she's got this just pale look on her face. And she's looking at me going, "You haven't heard, have you?" "No, heard what?" And she motions me upstairs and turns on the radio. And instead of Bad Company, it's Madonna coming out of my radio station. And then I hit the phone machine. I had an answering machine, obviously, back then. And it's program director, and he says, "Hey, no need to come in for your show Monday, but why don't you plan on coming in Monday afternoon and we'll talk." So,
oh no,
here we are again.
So when you walk in on Monday afternoon, right? So you get to the program director. You've been through this before. You've seen changes in formatting. You've seen changes in syndication and all that. So when people have gone through terminations, they can respond in one of 2 ways. Really, you can get pissed and you can get resentful. And tell me about that conversation, because knowing you personality-wise, I've always just seen this incredibly gregarious, beautiful, smiling. I can't imagine you slamming the stuff off the desk. But tell me about that. Tell me about that conversation, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I didn't react like that, only because I learned my lesson after KGON.
Yeah.
I had tons of anger that I carried with me for those 14 months.
I bet.
every time I'd see Mark and Brian getting on their station, I got angrier. We pull into Yakima, and I walk in that night, my first night in town, and I don't know what this guy was thinking, the night guy at the station. He thought it'd be funny, yuck, to get a cardboard cutout of Mark and Brian in the studio.
Oh,
yeah. I'm like,
you need something to throw darts at.
Yeah, right. Thanks for the welcome, buddy. Appreciate it.
Oh.
You know, I had a lot of pent up anger, and what I saw happening is that anger takes you down.
Yeah, it's toxic.
It is toxic. It's a perfect word for it. And so I began to see that I had to find a way to get rid of that. I had to forgive. I had to move on.
How did you?
Meditation.
Okay.
Just really seeing that maybe the people that I was angry at didn't have as much to do with it as I thought they did. It turns out they didn't. Of course, I was directing all my anger at them.
Sure. Well,
they were as innocent as we were, because it was a corporate decision. And slowly and surely, I did let it all go, to the point that when we were at Earth and they said, okay, we're going to have to part ways, it was just another bump in the road. I said, okay, well, I'm really bummed out, really disappointed, especially since Tom had enough.
Yeah.
He decided to split up the show then. He went his own way. He went over to KUFO.
Okay.
You know. Plus, I could tell that the program director didn't want to do this either.
Didn't want to let you go.
No, he didn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's horrible news to give somebody that you care and respect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't his idea. He was the manager. He had to see the plans through.
Yeah.
And that kind of eased the pain a little bit too, knowing it wasn't his idea. So, we left the building, and Tom said, "I've had it. I'm fed up." And I said, "I can't blame you."
Yeah.
And then Tom went to KUFO, and I went to the Beat. Remember the Beat?
KBBT.
107.5?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
And so now we're both solo artists. We're both working on our own. And I was at the Beat for about a year and a half.
Okay.
And then one day we're in the program director's office having you see a common theme here?
Yeah, man. I'm just picturing.
We're having our jock meeting, and we all walk in, but the general manager's there. And we're all going, well, this isn't good.
Yeah.
And he closes the door, and in his hand, he has a stack of checks.
Oh,
and he goes, well, okay, here's the scoop. At noon, we're no longer the Beat. We're Mix 107.5, and we're all 80s.
Wow.
And you're all fired. Here's your check. Here's your check. Here's your check. Here's your check. And we all went over to the morning show's house and got drunk.
Oh, I don't think they even had local DJs when they switched over, did they? Weren't they actually syndicated from someplace else?
They had no DJs when they first started.
That's right. Yeah.
And that was another interesting time for me, because I had something happen to me that is very similar to the story you told me on my podcast, Embrace the Change, when you were with Animotion and you wanted to go and sit behind the kit for Flock of Seagulls. When they first changed the format from the Beat to Mix, I went into the program director's office and I said, I don't know what you have planned for mornings, but I can do this.
Yeah.
And she kind of looked at me and went, yeah, I think you can too. So we stayed in touch, and we got to the point to where as Mix began to just be on the air playing music before they began to introduce on-air talent, I had a contract, and I was ready to sign it and be the morning guy at Mix 107.5. And then as things would have it, Kink had an opening all of a sudden, or it was rumored that they were going to have an opening in afternoons. And I had a friend call me and go, hey, you know what? I think you'd be perfect at Kink.
Oh, yeah.
I said, yeah, but I've got this contract I'm about to sign to do mornings over at Mix 107.5, the 80 station. And he said, I don't know, man. Take a look at Kink. It's a heritage radio station. It's been around back then about 35, 40 years.
Wow.
You might as well just go and have an interview with the guy, Dennis.
Sure.
So I did, and it was great. and I loved the station, and I loved the format. It was like all the music that I grew up listening to: Van Morrison,
Yeah.
Beatles, Counting Crows. It was such an awesome format. Dennis was a huge program director. He was a big name in the business.
Rest in peace.
Who, Dennis?
Yeah. Did Dennis pass away?
Oh,
Oh, okay. I must be thinking of somebody else. I'm so sorry. Well, good then.
oh,
I,
no,
okay.
Dennis is still with us. No, he's happy and living in Arizona.
Oh, good. Okay. Sorry.
But I really liked the idea of going to work for Kink, but I was torn because
Yeah.
I was good friends with the program director at Mix. I had this contract that I was going to sign. We'd talked about it. And I had one of those dilemmas, much like you, with Adam Ocean
Sure.
and Flock of Seagulls.
Yeah.
Either way you go, you're going to upset someone. And I had one of the classic moments in my life. Are you like this as you get older? You have milestones in your life that you look back on,
Yeah. Absolutely.
crossroad moments. And one of them for me was 3 a.m. I haven't told the program director at Mix that I want to take this job at Kink. I'm on the phone with my dad, and we're talking, and he goes, "Okay, let's do this. Put yourself in this position. It's 4:30 in the morning, and you're driving to Mix 107.5, and you're going to do the morning show. Go. How do you feel?" I said, "Yeah, I feel good. It's a cool station, cool format. Get to talk up the ramps. Like working with the staff. I think it's going to be great." "Good. Thumbs up." He goes, "Okay. Now clear that out of your mind." "All right, you're driving to Kink to do the afternoon show. Go. How do you feel?" And I paused and went, "Awesome."
Wow.
I feel totally awesome.
Wow. Just
Right
getting
place, right time. It just seems like I was born to be there. And he went, "Well, there's your answer.
big time.
You've got no choice. You've got to make the hard decisions." So,
Once
uh,
again, getting outside yourself, getting outside your head again a little bit, but dad was able to let you get there and help you get there.
yep,
Yeah, man.
yep. I talked to the program director, and she said, "Man, you're bumming me out. I had stuff in place,
But
but okay."
yeah.
And so the hardest thing I ever had to do. So I still didn't have the job at Kink yet.
Really, they had no formal offer.
I had to let the offer go at
Wow.
Mix before they
Yeah.
would look at me. I had to slide that contract back onto the program director's door. And then, as things would have it, I didn't hear from anybody at Kink for months.
Oh no. Oh,
I have just blown up my career. What have
oh.
I done?
Mary's at home saying, "Hey, listen, Dave, we have to have a talk about your priorities.
Oh,
Paper out's calling your name again."
I know. Oh, God. But then, thank goodness, they got to me in about 3 or 4 months. And that's when I signed on at Kink to do the afternoon show. And that was a 14-year stint.
14 years. I was going to ask, man. I know. I mean, that's where I really got to know your voice, and personality. 14 years,
Yep.
amazing, and
Yep.
worked with Sheila there.
Yeah.
Sheila Hamilton. You guys had a really huge connection, and I hate to say this. Peripherally, I remember people saying that it's really cool that Dave and Sheila. There was always talking about you guys as if you're a couple because you were so. There was a lot of just audio chemistry, which is and it wasn't meant in a bad way or anything. That's what people saw, that you really did click.
We totally did. Well, and there was a good reason for that. We were really good friends.
Yeah.
Off air. She was originally hired to work with Les Sarnoff, rest in peace.
Right.
And she was Les's news person. And when Les would go on vacation, they would have me come in and do the morning show with Sheila.
Okay.
And you can hear chemistry when it happens.
Yeah.
And you also know it when it's happening.
Right.
It was just clicking. So that when, it went on this way for, I guess I did afternoons at King for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, something like that. So that when it came time for Les to, he was ill.
Yeah.
And he had to leave the air. And so they decided to give Les the afternoon show, and they put Sheila and I in the mornings, and that's how we got to start doing mornings together. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. That when you get that kind of connection, because you and Tom, having worked together so many years in the past too, and went through just tumultuous, ups and downs. I mean, an incredible rise, but then also overcoming the adversity. And,
Right.
even as you and Sheila were together and working at Kink did outlast a lot of other stations. And, you looked at the way corporate radio took over places and changed programming. And, there was an independence in the way that Kink would broadcast. I know that it's a generational thing for sure. Folks in our generations really appreciate the programming, whereas maybe a younger audience might not care so much about banter and camaraderie that they might have with the station personalities.
Mhm. Yeah.
As it's changed so much. So you've been out of radio for a little bit now.
Yeah, I actually have. Yeah, they so the 14 years at Kink was fantastic, and then I guess I could preface this new stage by introducing a term that you might not be familiar with: PPM. It's personal people meters.
Okay.
This is the Nielsen organization that takes ratings, and they began to phase out of the old paper diaries, which is how they used to take ratings, and they put these personal people meters. They would hire people to wear these on their belt, and these personal people meters were like radio wave sucking devices that would find a radio wave that you were near and register what the station was.
Really?
So if you're in your car listening to Kink and you have your PPM on, it's going to notate that from such and such to such and such a time you had Kink on. If you get out of your car and walk into Target and they have KGON on, it's going to go, you're listening to KGON for these 20 minutes. Well, the thing with PPM is it's a good idea, but when it was first rolled out in Portland, it was rolled out very clumsily, very mishmashed. There weren't enough PPMs in Multnomah County. At least this is my theory. Kink did traditionally really, really good in Portland, Multnomah County.
Sure.
But then you get out to like maybe Troutdale or Molalla, and you're going to start to see more of the country stations or more KGON doing better than Kink.
Yeah.
And they had more of these PPMs out in the outlying areas, Vancouver, Washington. Not so much in Multnomah County, in Portland. So that we went from, this is the dilemma. When it was a diary system, when people were hired to, hey, you want to take ratings, and they'd mail you a paper diary and you'd write down Kink. Kink was perennial, number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, maybe number 5, back up to number 1. There was a point in, I think it was 2014, where Sheila and I were number 1 in the mornings. Kink won the Marconi Award for Radio Station of the Year.
Okay.
All these things were happening. And then they went to PPM, and all of a sudden the first PPM rating came out. Kink was number 11.
Wow.
Yeah, it just went.
Yeah.
Because all these PPMs were outside the metro area, and Kink could just never find a toehold with this new measuring service.
Sure.
And they suffered through it for a couple of years, and then in 2014, here's a story. You'll love this. How I found out I wasn't getting signed again at Kink. Here's a radio horror story.
Before you start, I was going to say, my friend Mike here in the chat says, this is like going to the principal's office every time.
It really is. I swear to God. This was a switcheroo, though. This one got me.
Okay.
This one was almost, I was so clueless, it was almost funny. Because every other time, hey, can you come on down to our office? You know what's going on.
Yeah.
You know it's coming. Well, this time, my contract was up, and I was waiting to talk about re-signing. Had even been, it had been intimated, hey, would you like to retire at Kink? I said, man, would I ever? That would be awesome. Working with Sheila. We had, by this time, we had Shelley B. We had our producer, and it was just a great show, man. Getting great ratings, hitting bonuses. Everything was all coming together. And so I got an email, hey, want to come down and discuss your contract this afternoon? Sure do. So finished the show, went home, caught a nap, came back at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday afternoon. walk into the general manager's office, and it's the program director and the general manager and the corporate PD, still not expecting or suspecting anything. Sit down, do jovial small talk. Then all of a sudden the conversation dies, and I go, "So, where do we begin? Let's start talking turkey." And they go, "Well, we're going to make some changes."
Oh, no.
And still clueless. Still, so did not see this coming. I'm like, "Oh yeah, you guys crack me up." Because
Yeah.
I thought everything was great.
You're clicking.
Station of the year, #1, bonus ratings, all the good things. We're going to make some changes. And all of a sudden it began to dawn on me, "Oh, you guys aren't kidding. Yeah, we're gonna look for maybe a younger host for Sheila." And they didn't actually say that, I suspect.
Okay.
But we decided not to resign you. Okay, well. And this is interesting, and I may be telling people something they already suspected, but one of the cool things they did, though, was because the program director, I think, fought for this. I got a chance to say goodbye.
Okay. On air, yeah.
I got a final show because this was Friday afternoon, and I got to come back Monday. They trusted me enough to not to blow up the station,
Right.
to come back and say goodbye, but I had to have a reason I was leaving. You can't just say, you can't really say I got fired.
Yeah.
That would be awkward and clumsy. So I concocted this whole thing over the weekend and it was based partly in truth, because living here in Malala, it's like a 50-mile drive one way and a 50-mile drive the other way. And, making that drive at 3 a.m. And there were times coming home from the station, I would, almost drive off the road. And so it was kind of worrying me, but I said that I had begun to really feel that the drive and the hours were starting to wear me down. And I just thought it was time to make some changes. So I've decided to step down. And that was the premise, my farewell show. And then we went through the whole morning and had a bunch of my friends calling, and Matt Safino joined us. And it was tough, but it was a damn good show. I was really proud of it. And I thank them for the chance to do that. That's for sure.
Well, that is a rare thing, right? I mean, that is not something that not only radio, but most places just, your key card stops working when you walk out the door, right? And it's interesting. I mean, I can feel the emotion though when you tell the story. It's when they sat down with you and said, we're going to make some changes. The word change, really was kind of a preface to what happened with you next. And I'm really impressed and proud of the mode that you went into, because you knew that you have an ability to not only take those punches and keep on, swinging, but you, when you started your podcast, that was, it was taking your talents and doing something productive and positive. So tell me about that. I mean, what was the phase from the program director sitting you down to realizing, all right, there's another chapter in Dave Scott's world that I need to bring out to people?
All right. So after Kink, I went right across the street to KGON, and I was doing the afternoon show at KGON, and that was good for about a year and a half. And then, sometimes you never know why they decide to make changes. I never did find out why in 2016 they said, we don't need your services anymore. I suspect it was because the program director I was never his guy. It was one of those hires when I had just gotten out of Kink. I had a lot of friends over at KGON.
Yeah.
I think the salespeople were all excited to have me back. And again, just my theory, I think the program director maybe felt pressured into hiring me. And so I think he just wanted his own guy in that chair.
Okay.
So when that happened, something clicked. And I just went, you know what? I'm 62. I'm done. I'm done chasing this, because normally what I would have done is get the air checks out there, talk about moving again. And I just went, no, I think I'm done. I had some voice tracking going on. I was still voice tracking for stations down in Southern Oregon.
Okay.
So I still had my voice on the radio. But I thought, I think it's time for me to look at a new phase, because, let's be honest. we're not here forever.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, I'm going to transition off the air. I kind of thought Iris and I had talked an awful lot in our shows, before I went on the air when she was leaving. Hey, we're going to retire together at 65. That was the plan. And so now it's 62 and I'm off the air, and I think, well, what am I going to do? And the universe just came down and just gave me a huge kiss, in that I had a friend of mine. You might know him, actually. He was integral with the Oregon Music Hall of Fame, Tom Holland.
Oh, my God. Tom is one of my favorite people on the planet.
I love him. Best men in the world. He co-owns a business called Internet Jock.
Right. That's right. With Bob Anchetta.
Started by Bob Anchetta.
Yeah.
Great story. Back at Earth 105, Bob Anchetta was there, and it was right after they blew up the station. And Bob comes up to me in the hall, and he goes, "Hey, man," so this is 1998. And he goes, "You know what an MP3 is?" And I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
He goes, "I'm thinking of starting a business where I do like voice work and voice tracking on the internet." And I'm like, "Huh, well, good luck with that."
Right. Not thinking.
20 years later, he has one of the most dominant voice businesses on the internet. Tom Holland calls. I'm at the dentist because, which is traditional for someone who's lost their job. You have 30 days of insurance. So you hurry and you get all the appointments done before your insurance is up, because who can afford Cobra?
Right.
So I'm at the dentist to get that one last cleaning and checkup, and phone rings. It's Tom Holland. He says, "Hey, I've got an opportunity for you." They started talking to me about working for Internet Jock, and we had a couple dinners with BA and Tom and Derek, the general manager, and I liked what I heard, and I think they did too. And so they said, "Come work for us," and I could work from home.
Yeah.
I could work from home. It was a livable wage. I could stay at home and work. I could still voice track. And that's what I mean by the universe just giving me this giant kiss.
For sure. And use your talents.
Exactly. I could still do production, which I love, and I was still involved with that. I was still talking to radio people. I was still in the circle, and I was working from the comfort of my own home. So it's right around this period now, 1962, or 2016, somewhere around there, that I started to think about a podcast. And Embrace the Change came about as just it's like a song. Paul McCartney had talked about some of his songs that would come to him in their entirety: song, chorus, hook, notes, everything. Boom. I was talking to a friend, and it just hit me. Embrace the Change. I saw the logo. I had the tagline. I knew what it is I wanted to do. I wanted to talk to people who've gone through changes in their life to see if those changes have been as instructive to them as my changes and my hard times had been to me.
Okay.
Have they grown as much as I've grown during my tough times? And so I went through the learning curve and learned, all about how to put a podcast together. And I'm not a big web guy. I didn't know that you had the business, or I'd have totally been knocking at your door to help you.
No worries.
But put it together and started to talk to people, and it's been wonderful because I'm learning that everybody's got a different story.
Yeah.
But the chapters are all essentially the same. We're all just trying to find our way through this world. Sometimes you get involved with a bit that works, and it's great. And hopefully you can keep your head about you so that you don't get carried away and full of yourself. And sometimes you get involved with a bit that doesn't. And now you're on your own to find the intestinal fortitude to take from it, learn from it, and move on. And that's kind of what this podcast has become. I've had a chance to talk to some amazing people. One of the most special times was last year. I tracked down Des Dickerson, who is Prince's first guitarist.
Yeah.
So Des was
part of the revolution, buddy.
Yeah. In the first rendition, Dirty Minds, Controversy.
Yeah, through 1999.
The guy with the bonsai bandana.
He's the guy singing that extra line in 1999.
That's Des.
The song, yeah, I love him.
Des in Minneapolis, before I got into radio, Des was in my band. He was our guitarist.
What?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, Des was the guy. Des and Glenn Smith, my other buddy, we were traveling around South Dakota, North Dakota, Iowa, small towns in Minnesota, playing all these bars and high schools and whatever you
Amazing.
find. And Des was always the guy that seemed to have it together. He was the guy that had the vision. He was the guy that had the grandiose dreams.
Yeah.
And we were together for about 2 years or so. And then when we were playing in Rapid City, South Dakota, and as part of the deal, we had to go talk to a radio station. I think it was KKLZ in Rapid City, South Dakota. And that's when I first got the bug to be on the radio.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, we walked into this radio station, and I still can smell the smell of the equipment and the records and the dust, and it's just there's a total feeling about radio stations that's so romantic, and I still to this day just love it. And we did this interview, and I was never the same afterwards. I was just taken with the idea of being on the air, so much so that when we got back to Minneapolis, I went and introduced myself to the people at Brown Institute, which was a radio school there in the Twin Cities. Said, I'm not sure I'm done with this music thing yet, but I have a feeling. So keep my app on file.
Got a fever.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
The band went to Custer, South Dakota. And that was the week I decided I was going to quit the band. So when we finished that week worth of gigs, we got back to Minneapolis, and I told Des and Glenn, I'm going to move on. I'm going to get into radio. That would have been 1975. And wow. I didn't see him again until I was in Southeast Texas. I was the music director at this radio station in Southeast Texas. I opened up the Warner Brothers package, pulling out the albums, looking at the back covers. All of a sudden, my eyeballs poke out of my head like a Tex Avery cartoon. There's Des. That's Des on this album. Who is this Prince guy? Oh my God, that's Des. And then went on. I got to watch Des. And all the stories, and then the story about opening up for the Rolling Stones, but never connected with him. Still hadn't talked to him since that day, 45 years prior. Well, flash forward to now, embrace the change. I'm just kind of, how the days where you're idly just kind of flipping around on YouTube and the algorithms taking you places.
Yeah. And
I find this one video of Prince opening for the Rolling Stones in California, in Los Angeles. And it's all about how Des Dickerson was really the reason that Prince decided to come back for the second show. And I saw these pictures of Des, and I just went, you know what? I wonder if he would be interested in doing the podcast. So I personal messaged him, never thinking I'd hear from him. And all of a sudden he gets back and goes, hey, dude, yeah, I'd love to talk to you.
Wow.
And so if you go to davescottnow.com, you'll see the episode.
I see it there.
The conversation you hear when he answers the phone and I say hello is the first time we have talked in 45 years.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
No setup. Wow. That's
nope.
I started your podcast with Shel Bailey's Keep Punching the Face episode. I hadn't even seen the Des episode, and Des changed my life, honestly. When I first got just completely obsessed with music, Prince was my hero. I thought I could be Prince. So growing up in Great Falls, Montana, I would dress like him. I'll send you pictures. I got pictures of me dressed as Prince, but I was always singing Dez's parts in those songs, as you're 13, 14 years old, that's when you can kind of pretend and still get away with it. But I would bet that you, because of that history, and your, sort of like your evolution, you've come through all those visits to the principal's office, right? All those kick me when I'm down moments. And I have listened to Des on other podcasts, Prince podcasts, talking about how the revolution is sort of tried to keep the name going and the music going, where they'll go out and they'll perform these songs singing as Prince. Right.
Yeah,
he does a lot of Prince's parts, I know, and singing those. But I can't wait to hear that episode with you. When we archive this tonight, I'm certainly going to put the link to the Dave Scott Now link, which is right there for people. But yeah, I think that interview for me, it's almost as exciting as the Paul McCartney story. It's just and the fact that you were in a band with him 45 years later,
Yeah.
or earlier, it's just
for me, the podcast, and you'll hear this in our conversation. He tells some amazing stories about how when he went to audition for the Prince gig, he was set to go to Custer, South Dakota. He was still playing that same circuit. He hooked up with a
wow.
bass player and another drummer and still chugging it out. And he met Prince in Dell's Tire Mart in downtown Minneapolis. And he said that he decided he had talked to a jazz guy. And the guy said, you don't have to shred all the time. And something, just instinct or something, had said, you know what? Just play the parts that sound good. So when he did his audition for Prince, he just played the parts that fit. And he's convinced that that's what got him the gig with Prince.
Wow.
Prince followed him out to the parking lot and said, hey, are you interested? And Des said, I sure am. I got to go and do this gig in Custer, but afterwards, let's definitely talk. But the beautiful part for me personally was that I could finally connect with Des, because I kept in touch with Glenn, the bass player. He was a longtime friend, and we'd seen each other since. But Des, no, because obviously our paths went totally different ways. But there was a moment after Custer, South Dakota, and I had decided that I was going to get into radio. I'll never forget it. We had broken down. The band was loaded into the van, and it was probably 5 a.m, and we're driving down the highway. Glenn is asleep in the back of the van on the equipment. We had to trade out. That was the bad spot. Des was in the driver's seat of the van, snoozing, and I'm driving. And I'm so excited because I've got this feeling that I finally found my calling. I finally found what I was looking for. Because even with music, I never really could truly picture myself doing it for a living.
Yeah.
I didn't see me making that connection. I didn't know how it was going to end because it was really the only thing I knew how to do or wanted to do. I'd played music all my life. But I couldn't make that last giant jump to meeting the guy who was going to get us in to do the record and do the touring. Something about the whole touring thing didn't jive with me. I was too much of a homebody. So there were too many things about it that didn't fit. So I finally found my calling. We're driving down the highway. Des is sitting next to me. And on the radio, Sundown by Gordon Lightfoot is playing. And I almost got tears because it was just a culmination of, you, my son, are now on the path. You've gotten the answers you're looking for. To quote U2, you found what you're looking for. And get ready, because this is going to be a fun ride. Des was sitting right there.
Wow.
And so I finally, with our conversation, could tell him, man, I've just wanted to talk to you for the longest time because you were there at a pivotal point in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I could tell you this story. And he's got some great stories about what he's up to now. He lives in Nashville. He's done very well for himself. You're going to enjoy it. So check it out. Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
You know what? And if I find things that, questions unanswered in your podcast, I might try to track them down because, I would probably avoid fanboying with him. But I really, as you know, the focus on All Access Live is kind of hanging backstage, catching up with visionaries and people that have been influential to me. He's at the top of that list, man. Man.
You'll love it. He tells the story about how he ended up being the guy that wore the bonsai bandana.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah.
Great story.
You've got a ton of amazing episodes. I was honored that you would even consider talking to me on your show. The guests that you have are phenomenal. Some that I know well too. I mean, the Shel Bailey interview was really interesting and fun and interesting. You talk about embracing the change. One thing that I noticed in that conversation was just her departure from radio here in Portland, Charlie Girl, that whole sort of phase, and folks that are here in Portland may not know how that changed. So what I recommend is that everybody go to davescottnow.com, check out the Embrace the Change podcast. It's available on all the streaming platforms and everything as well. If you want to go check out one episode and you're from Portland and you want to kind of hear another story about how radio can just get up and kick your ass a little bit, it's entertainment in general, right? Because it was also part of TV, right? The Charlie thing was TV for her too.
Talk about an indomitable spirit. She just keeps. Yep. That's what I call the episode. Keep punching life in the face because she'd get knocked down and she'd reinvent herself. And get knocked down again, and she's just she's a superwoman. I love that conversation.
Yeah, she is. Speaking of superheroes and people that have embraced the change that have been on that journey with you, guess who just chimed into the chat?
Who?
Tim Taylor says, "Hey guys,
Timmy!
Dave, no lime in the coconut. Love you, brother." So, hey Tim, it's good to see you here.
Should I tell that story? Ask him if I should tell that story. Lime
okay, yeah. You know what? This is. I think this is a great way to end it because I think there's a smile on your face. So let's have you tell that story.
All right. Tim was never convinced that some of the artists that, especially Iris and I liked, were things that KGON should be playing. One of them was Nielsen. I always thought Nielsen, was a great artist. Lime and the Coconut. And Tim just could not hear that. Every time I go, no, let's play some Nielsen. He would fit perfectly. He's got some great rockin' songs. He was good friends with Ringo Starr, and he was part of that rock and roll Rat Pack in Los Angeles with John Lennon, and he's a rock and roll fatality story. He's truly got a heritage. KGON should be playing Nielsen, and every time he'd look at me with this quizzical look on his face and go, "You put the lime in the coconut." At that point, I go, "There's no point in even talking anymore. We've lost him. You
got to have the Abbott and Costello sort of the 1-2 punch, man. The heckle always makes for a much more interesting conversation, doesn't it?
Lime in the coconut.
Everybody knows it though. It's one of those those lines that even if you didn't really resonate with it, everybody remembers it.
Yep.
I got to tell you, Dave, I'm so grateful that, you know what? I know that it was heartbreaking to have our internet connection drop last week.
Oh.
But you know what? I think the rest of the universe needed you and I to have a little bit of time between then and now, to catch up. And, you got a chance to sort of, sweep up the ashes a little bit more back home from the fires. And I'm still I'm unpacking my evacuation too. But I am so grateful, man, that you took this time, buddy. And I'm glad your eye is healing up. And really am honored to be part of your Embrace the Change sort of focus. I am proud to know and call you a friend, man. You're just a wonderfully inspiring human being.
Thank you, Kevin. You're a good soul too, and
thank you, man.
I'm glad you're in my universe. I'm proud of myself with good people, and you're definitely that. That's
what we got to do. We just got to keep surrounding ourselves with positivity. My friend Melinda just chimed in from Illinois here. That gal has been incredible in chasing down health. Man, that girl has been dealing with a cancer scare for years now, man. And she still would find ways to come hang out with us backstage at Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles, or she'd come out, she'd trek across the country and see these shows. And so kudos to you, Melinda, for even hanging out with us here today and being part of the conversation. First of all, let me just catch back up and say a couple of things. Number one, thank you to Nicole DaCosta and CoinTV AM Northwest for giving us a great spot on All Access Live. A lot of friends that have actually chimed in on YouTube to subscribe to this. If you're watching this and you haven't yet subscribed, I'm going to put this up here. I want you to please go to youtube.com/All Access Live with Kevin Rankin. Go to the link, subscribe. It'll give you notifications, and I've got a ton of things coming up. Dave, it's a special thing for me to have you do the part 2. This next 2 weeks is unbelievable to me. Tomorrow, you and I had talked about me moving out from Montana. The gentleman that brought me out here, the singer for my band at that point, is one of these guys that has a fairy tale story, musician that just has a remarkable way he started music, where he's at right now. He's back in Montana. Dave Rummins is on tomorrow. I've got Blake Sakamoto. Everybody knows
what a
him.
Guy.
Blake's amazing.
Awesome.
So most people around the world know him as the keyboardist from the Dan Reed Network, and he's done a lot of stuff locally to sort of do his embracing the change and pivoting. So he's on the 24th on Thursday. The 28th is really cool. I've got this awesome band from New York. They've become friends of mine that I've toured around with forever, called Jesse's Girl. Folks that may be watching know them from the 80s cruise through the Caribbean and down to the Dominican Republic when we do the 80s shows. They are so much fun. They're on the Monday, the 28th, 29th. Stacey Newman, who actually has this podcast where she's got Winona Judd and all these amazing visionaries out of Nashville. And then the 1st of October, I've got Federico Pohl, who you and I talked about this just before we went on. Fed he's the bass player for Lindsey Buckingham and Christine McVie. He started off really his big sort of break. I know he was with Jose Feliciano, but Joe Cocker, his era of Joe Cocker, the dude has these stories that give you goosebumps, man. He's a great storyteller. He's, he'll be, he's one of those rock and roll Hall of Fame guys, man. He's been on more records than people can count. So such cool, fun guests coming up in the next couple of weeks. And it's kicked off by you this week, man. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being
I'm
here.
proud, I'm honored, and I want to congratulate you too. It's been fun to watch. We talked a lot on our episode on Embrace the Change about this chapter in your life, and I'm convinced that eventually I think you're going to be back out on the road with Flock and playing live again. But I think this is a building block, much like me when I was off the air for good. I went, okay, I've got this skill set. I want to put it to use. I think down the road, what you're doing is going to come into play, and you're going to see a grand scheme. I don't know. We'll have to check back, but I think what you're doing now is laying the foundation for something that's going to help a lot of people and make you very happy.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how much I'm able to talk about it, but I am excited that I am going to start doing a little bit of work with Audix Microphones in Wilsonville. They just asked me to host a few sessions down at their facility in Wilsonville, and it's really great. They're going to do live music performance. So the streaming events that you've seen on some platforms, they're really trying to have major production done where I'll do this. I'll do a Q&A with some great visionaries and artists, and they'll do a live performance. So it's just a cool little partnership that I'm going to do with them, but they're a great company. They're based locally. And
big supporters of the Oregon Music Hall of Fame.
Big time. Yeah, man. Audix Microphones has been supporters of me right here. This microphone that I'm hiding with my little caption is a wonderful Audix mic, provided by 5 Star Guitars. So,
can I jump in and say 5 Star Guitars?
Yeah, absolutely.
Joff Metz, he sings the Embrace the Change intro.
That's right. Yeah, the theme song from your podcast is our dear friend Joff Metz from 5 Star Guitars. It all comes back around, man. Cheryl Bland is a great supporter too, man. She loves your show. She loves this lineup. She said this is a fun lineup coming up, but she's a big supporter of Oregon Music Hall of Fame and huge in this community. So thank you for watching, Cheryl. I appreciate it. Melinda, that I talked about fighting the cancer, she says she's in the recliner, kicking back, watching us. So Melinda, thank you for being here. Thanks to everybody for chiming in on this chat. It's been a hell of a lot of fun, man. I'm proud of you, buddy. You're amazing.
Me too. Thank you so much.
God. So we're safe. We're fire free. And the next phase, man, I'm going to just put your link up one more time. So if you haven't yet, folks, go to davescottnow.com. You can watch all episodes of Embrace the Change and also find out what stones we had not unturned in this conversation. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dave Scott, thank you, my friend.
See you all down the road, everybody.
You got it, buddy. All right. Take care, everyone. All right.